Christmas is a special time of the year. Kids can't wait to see what Santa brings for them. Adults are trying to make sure everything is just right. Families are reconnecting over home-cooked meals, and the air is full of magic. That's what we would like to think of when it comes to the biggest of winter holidays, but not everyone is filled with cheer. In fact, some are out to bring misery. Christmas tragedy may be extreme, but it is not unheard of, and in fact has made some white Christmases a little blue. Here are 10 tragedies that struck during the Christmas season. Number 1. The Ashland Tragedy, Ashland, Kentucky, 1881. Ashland, Kentucky was a small city on the banks of the Ohio River. Life was peaceful there, nothing much of note happened, and that's how people liked it. The inhabitants of Ashland would have blended in with those of just about any small town at the time. It was a very average place. Among these everyday ordinary folks were the members of the Gibbons family. Mr. and Mrs. Gibbons and their 3 children, Robert 17, Fanny 14, and Sterling 11. It is hard to say how well known they truly were before 1881. But after Christmas Eve of that year, they were the talk of the town. Early in the morning of Christmas Eve, neighbors were awakened by the alarm of a fire at the Gibbons home. Inside the burning house were the dead bodies of Robert, Fanny, and Fanny's 15-year-old friend, Emma Carico. Each child's skull had been crushed with an axe and crowbar, and the 2 girls had been sexually abused. The fire was an attempt to cover up what had been done. It was later found out that George Ellis, a local bricklayer, and 2 of his co-workers, William Neal and Ellis Kraft, were responsible for the grisly scene. About 10 days following the murder, George began to show evidence of guilt. A U.S. Marshal questioned him, and he broke and told the whole story. Ellis had become infatuated with Fanny Gibbons and had decided he would have her before the year was out. He was able to convince Neal and Kraft to go with him that morning. Ellis confessed to the crimes and implicated his partners. For his cooperation, Ellis was tried and given a life term in May 1882. However, he would not see that term though. A lynch mob removed him from his cell on the night of his sentencing and hanged him from a tree near the remains of the Gibbons home. His accomplices were both found guilty and hanged later that year. Number 2. Los Feliz Murder Mansion, Los Angeles, California, 1959. The night of December 6, 1959 was like any ordinary winter night in the Perelson household. The house was decorated for the coming holiday. The tree was trimmed, and underneath were the neatly placed gifts for the whole family. It was shaping up to be a nice Christmas in the mansion on Los Feliz. Then, for no apparent reason, Dr. Perelson took a ball-peen hammer to his wife's skull while she was sleeping and left her lying dead in their bedroom. He then went after their teenage daughter, Judy, but fortunately, he was unable to do much more than severely beat her. Judy managed to escape to a nearby neighbor's house. He then drank a glass of acid in the living room, taking his own life. It was as if time had stopped inside the walls of the old Perelson home, even though it had been bought several times throughout the years and then passed on. The inside decor stayed unchanged for over 50 years. The only difference made to the mansion was the installation of an alarm system. One couple who had bought the house a year after that fateful night only used the house as a storage facility. Nearby neighbors recalled the new homeowners taking boxes to the mansion during the day, but never recalled them staying at night. Although no one lived in the mansion, there have been people who came near it to peek in the windows. The Christmas decorations and gifts that were there during the night of the murders still remain inside the mansion, alongside bloodstains and what is left of the crime scene. The house had fallen into disrepair and is said to be haunted by evil spirits. One trespasser who had tried to break into the home claims to have been bitten by a black widow spider during the attempt, and then repeatedly unable to shut off her car alarm soon after. No one knows why Dr. Perelson committed such a horrible act that night. Some people suspected that the doctor had financial issues. Others suspected that he had been secretly institutionalized. As of March 2016, the house was sold for $2.3 million at a probate sale, and the time capsule creepiness was permanently disrupted when the Perelson's possessions were removed. Number 3. The Covina Massacre, Covina, California, 2008. On Christmas Eve, 80-year-old Joseph Ortega was throwing a party for his family. His children and grandchildren had gathered to celebrate the holiday together. What they did not expect was for Santa himself to come ring their doorbell. When the door was opened to reveal Saint Nick himself, Ortega's 8-year-old granddaughter ran excitedly towards him and was the first to receive one of his hellish gifts. A 9mm round struck in her face, wounding but fortunately not killing the child. After fatally shooting several of the partygoers, Santa unwrapped the gift he was carrying, a homemade flamethrower filled with racing fuel. He used this to set the house ablaze. The massacre took 9 lives out of the 25 attendees that night, 8 by gunshot and 1 by fire. The Psycho Santa turned out to be Bruce Pardo, the ex-husband of Ortega's youngest daughter, Sylvia. The Pardos' divorce had recently become final, and Bruce obviously was not taking it well. Though evidence shows that he had planned to flee to another part of the country, he decided to travel 30 miles to his brother's then unoccupied home in Sylmar, California, to end his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Neighbors state that the Ortega family had a yearly tradition of having someone dress as Santa Claus to join them in their festivities. Police officials assumed that Pardo may have been known of this tradition and took advantage of this. Pardo had no criminal record and was known for being an outstanding student. His life would all come crashing down after being laid off from his computer engineering job and being required to pay his newly divorced wife $10,000. When Pardo was found, he had $17,000 and a plane ticket to Canada. Pardo planned to flee to Canada, but may have been in serious pain from third-degree burns on both of his arms, a result of his homemade flamethrower device exploding during the tragic event, and even causing parts of his Santa suit to melt onto his body. Number 4. Christmas Murder-Suicide, Grapevine, Texas, 2011. It seems that angry husbands dressing as Santa and wreaking havoc on their loved ones is becoming a trend. 3 years after the Covina Massacre, there was a similar murder-suicide in the city of Grapevine, Texas. Nazarene Ramati was having a quiet Christmas get-together with her 2 children, her niece, her brother, and her sister. They had enjoyed the traditional Christmas morning and had just finished opening gifts when there was a knock at the door. On the other side was Ramati's estranged husband, as is Yazdan Penna, dressed in a Santa outfit. Shortly after entering the apartment, he opened fire. He killed everyone in the apartment before turning the gun on himself. It is unknown which of the victims was able to make the 911 call, but dispatchers say that there was a silence followed by a raspy voice pleading for help, and then the line going dead seconds later. The police arrived at the apartment to find the dead bodies along with the unwrapped presents scattered around the living room. The gunman, Yazdan Penna, had recently filed for bankruptcy due to his failing real estate business. Along with his bankruptcy went his marriage, which ended shortly after. Although his alienation from family and financial troubles are largely considered to constitute the main motive, another theory suggests that Yazdanpana, a Muslim, did not agree with his 19-year-old daughter, Nona, having a relationship with a non-Muslim. Nona's friends reported that she often came to school crying and stating that her dad was crazy and being overprotective and regulating her home life. Her dad constantly took her phone away and went through all of her conversations and call history. He even installed cameras around the house to monitor his family. Whatever the reason may be, this event was a major Christmas tragedy. Number 5. Christmas Massacres, Democratic Republic of the Congo, 2008. The Lord's Resistance Army, or the LRA, is a violent Christian paramilitary organization operating in Central Africa and headed by a man known as Joseph Kony. From its beginnings as a Ugandan rebel group, the LRA has spread to neighboring countries, including South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And its guerrilla fighters and children soldiers have brought devastation and misery wherever they went. After the Ugandan army attacked LRA headquarters with support from the South Sudanese, Congolese, and Central African Republic Army, the rebels in the LRA split into several groups to hunt down civilians. They waited until Christmas Eve, when people had gathered for holiday activities, and moved in upon the unsuspecting civilians to destroy. They crushed the heads of their victims with clubs and axes. They chopped others with machetes. A majority of the 400 people that lost their lives to the LRA were either chopped to pieces or burnt alive. The majority of the survivors had their lips cut off to remind them to not speak ill of the rebel army. Maybe the hardest to grasp of all injuries were the severe neck injuries that 2 preschool-aged girls had sustained when LRA militants tried to twist off their heads. Over 20,000 people were forced to vacate their homes, and at least 160 children were kidnapped. Number 6. Cyclone Tracy, Darwin, Northern Territory, Australia, 1974. The citizens of Darwin were no strangers to cyclones and the damage that they could cause. However, because of a warning a little over a week before Christmas of a cyclone that never came near Darwin, the residents ignored the warnings about the approaching Cyclone Tracy. Expecting another close call or false alarm, the people of Darwin went about their day preparing for Christmas, attending parties, rather than evacuating or preparing for a devastating storm. Even in the face of high winds and hard rain, the citizens gave no thought that the tropical storm would actually make landfall. It wasn't until early Christmas morning that the center of Tracy found its way to Darwin. The storm killed 71 people, causing hundreds of millions of dollars in damage, took 80% of homes and 70% of the buildings in general. Many of those who survived were left homeless. Number 7. JonBenet Ramsey, Boulder, Colorado, 1996. JonBenet Ramsey was a star of the child beauty pageant scene and the daughter of a former beauty queen. It was not for her poise or beauty that she found real fame, but through her unexplained and still unsolved death. 6-year-old Ramsey was reported missing on Christmas of 1996 after a ransom note was found in her home. Her body was later found in her family's basement under a white blanket with a garrote still around her neck. According to autopsy results, Ramsey's cause of death was asphyxiation owing to strangulation. There was little evidence to be found on her body or in the surrounding area to help convict anyone. Many media outlets pointed the finger at the parents or at the older brother of the child, but there was no evidence to support these claims. In fact, the only evidence found was a bit of DNA that belonged to an unknown male. JonBenet's family were constantly on the news and followed by cameramen everywhere. Ramsey's older brother strongly disliked the media surrounding the death of his little sister and stated that he wanted to have a normal childhood that didn't involve being in front of a TV camera. Over the years, the family maintained their innocence. 12 years after JonBenet's death, her family was officially exonerated from the case. It is possible that JonBenet's killer is still out there today, living a normal life and hardly thinking about the horrific crime they committed on that fateful Christmas. The case is still open today. Number 8. The Muck Dam Disaster, Palmertown in Saltville, Virginia, 1924. It was Christmas Eve, and the residents of the small Virginia town of Palmertown were gearing up for a Merry Christmas. Several were in their homes enjoying the company of their families, and others were attending various Christmas festivities a little over a mile away in Saltville. The weather conditions that evening had many hoping for a classic white Christmas. At 8 p.m., Palmertown got a white Christmas, but not the kind that its residents had wanted. An inadequately built dam holding back over 30 acres of alkali waste and muck water burst and flooded both small towns. Homes, businesses, and human beings were crushed under the weight of the white, thick muck that washed over the area in what had been described as a moving, roaring mountain. People who encountered this event recalled the sound of a loud roar. The wave of muck was described as nearly 100 feet high and 300 feet wide. People fought for their lives as they were swept away by the waste. Heroic civilians tried to save others struggling to escape the muck, but were also swept away. Some survivors claimed that the muck had left small holes in their skin and scars on their eyes. One heartbreaking story concerns 2 children who were found by rescue workers from the nearby plant. 3 of the workers, Windham Roberts, John Helton, and Dave Hicks, heard a child's voice calling for its mother in one of the buildings swept away by the muck. They cut a hole in the roof of the house and saw a small girl's hand come through it. "Please don't kill us. My little sister is here in bed with me. Mama and Papa are downstairs, and we have been calling for them all night, but they won't answer us," the little girl cried. The children hadn't known about the horrible events going on and were luckily on the 2nd floor of the building. Number 9. The Italian Hall Tragedy, Calumet, Michigan, 1913. The Christmas tragedy at the Italian Hall in Calumet, Michigan actually need to be understood in the context of an ongoing crisis in the town's mining community. That July, about 7,000 miners with the C&H Copper Mining Company went on strike. They were trying to get a fair wage, end dangerous drilling practices, and get the company to provide support beams in the underground mines to stabilize the tunnels and prevent dangerous cave-ins. The mine owners didn't want to do any of those things because they would cost more money. As one company representative stated, support beams were expensive, while replacing miners lost to cave-ins cost nothing. The strike stretched on for 6 long months, which left most of the miners' families destitute and making Christmas celebration almost impossible. Luckily, the Ladies' Auxiliary of the Western Federation of Miners stepped up and threw a Christmas party for the children. When Christmas Eve came, about 200 adults and 500 children packed into the top floor of Calumet's Italian Hall with hopes of forgetting their troubles for a few hours and enjoying the holiday with their family, community, and fellow workers. Everything was going well, and as the night drew on and people started to head home to their own celebrations or to their bed to rest, the children were gathered at the stage to receive what would probably be their only gifts that Christmas. The one flaw in planning this party was that there was only one way in or out of the hall, which was a narrow, steep staircase. At some point, someone, or possibly more than one person, opened the door at the bottom of the staircase and started yelling, "Fire!" This, of course, alarmed the partygoers, and they began to rush for the exit. When the first person down the stairs reached the exit, they found the door blocked from the outside. More and more people rushed down the stairs in a frenzied attempt to escape the fire that never was. People were trampled and suffocated by the crowd pressing against the blocked door. Before the night was over, 73 people, including 59 children, were dead. The oldest to fall victim to the stampede was 66-year-old Kate Pidden. The youngest was 2.5-year-old Raphael Laser. There were families who arrived for the Christmas party that night with several children, but were childless on Christmas morning. The culprits remain unknown, and no one was ever arrested for starting the deadly stampede. Number 10. The Lawson Family Murders, Germantown, North Carolina, 1929. On Christmas Day, 1929, Charlie Lawson sent his oldest son, Arthur, on an errand and then began to murder the remainder of his family. By the end of the day, Arthur would be the only surviving Lawson, and the surrounding community would be left wondering why. Charlie started his slaughter with Carrie, age 12, and Maybelle, age 7. The two girls were leaving the house to visit their aunt and uncle and had no idea that they would never get past the barn. This is where Charlie lay in wait with a shotgun. He shot both girls and then bludgeoned them with the butt of his gun to make sure the deed was done. He then took his daughter's lifeless bodies to the tobacco barn so no one would find them until the time was right. After hiding the bodies of his daughters, Charlie walked back to the house and found his wife, Fanny, sitting on the porch. Without hesitation, Charlie killed her before taking out his other children one by one. Last and possibly most tragic was the 4-month-old baby, Mary Lou. Charlie set aside his shotgun for the youngest of his children and used his bare hands to beat her to death. After everyone was dead, Lawson set his family up in a neat line in front of the house. He placed rocks under their heads to serve as pillows and crossed their arms over their chest. He then wandered into the woods and hid for quite some time. The bodies of the Lawson family were discovered later that day, and a crowd began to gather around the ill-fated family's homestead. The crowd was able to hear Charlie's final shot, the one that took his own life. They found him in the woods with a single gunshot wound to the head next to a tree that had a track trampled around it. Some think that Charlie paced in circles around the tree, letting what he had just done sink in before finally turning the gun on himself. There have been many theories as to what Charlie's motives may have been. Some claim that he may have been a victim of organized crime. A new, sickening theory is that Charlie had impregnated his oldest daughter, Marie, whom he had an incestuous relationship with. Whatever the cause, we may never know. The picture you see here is the final family portrait taken shortly before the chilling events of that Christmas morning.